Hello, everybody. Akamatzu here, back with another thoughts video. This time on Black Myth Wukong, as you see here on the screen. I just finished it not that long ago over on my Twitch channel, indicated in the top right screen. You can see them there. And I just want to share my thoughts like I always do. Now, prefacing, I saw it seemed like it was talked about a lot as like, oh, look how gorgeous the graphics of this game is. Oh man, this game's gonna be beautiful and stuff like that. I remember seeing pieces of articles and like people's tweets about this before this game came out, and I feel like it was years before this game came out. I don't know how long though. I can't remember. To me, for the most time, it felt like a game that honestly was never going to come out. Almost a too good to be true kind of thing. And I was like, there's no way it's going to be that great. And totally unrelated game, but another game that made me feel that way. I apologize if I get the name wrong, but there was this game that came out on Steam. It was like a extraction shooter. I think it was called like The Day Before or something, or something like that. I had it on my wish list, and it came out and it bombed completely. But before it came out, there was so much hype about that game and talking about how like graphically beautiful it is and everything. And then it came out and it didn't do that well. In a way, I kind of thought this was going to go the same way, because you just saw tidbits about the game. Like it felt like every once in a year, and then it felt like a boogeyman. That was about it. That's all I really got to preface it. I didn't really follow the game at all. I never heard of the game publisher or the game developers or anything. I didn't pay attention to any of the advertisement for it or anything. Okay, so as I always do, I always separated the categories in the good, the bad, and wish list, being things I wish the game had. So let's start off with the good. It's a great action game, I will say. It does take, I think for me, it took a while to get into, more than I would have other games. I kept referring or relating this game to Sekiro, and I do think that is a fair assessment. I think it has more in common with that game than how people have been kind of like relating it towards Dark Souls games that have like stat ups and stuff. I think it's more in kind with Sekiro in the way that you explore the game and how the combat is. You take the parry mechanic in Sekiro, and I think it's really easy to get used to. But the parry mechanic in this game, oh my gosh, I sucked at it for at least 30 hours, if not longer. No, it had to be even more than that, because I had like 26 hours on my playthrough when I restarted it. And when I restarted, I still sucked at it. The parry mechanic in this game took me forever to figure out how to get it. And I think that was the thing that was hampering my gameplay the most. Because once it clicked, then everything kind of just fell together. And after a while, I really started first trying like 75% of the bosses in the game. Now, I don't know if that's just the typical experience or not, but that's what I had. I first tried the final boss. Although the secret, hardest actual boss in the game, he took me about, I think, 2 or 3 hours to beat. But there was really only, I think, one boss outside of that boss that took me an hour. Or no, there was 2 bosses that took me an hour to beat outside of that, like, the hardest boss in the game that took me 2 to 3 hours. Every other boss I got at least on the first try, the second, or the third. I was very surprised by that, I have to say. Before I played it, it was kind of stereotyped as like a Souls-like game. Surprisingly, a lot of the bosses, I feel like you can kind of run through them with how the game is. But I don't think that's a downside. I think the combat just clicked with me after a while, which is nice. So it's a very good action game. There's a lot of things for you to do. There's 3 stances for you to use. I think they're nice. I avoided 2 of them. I'm not going to lie. I didn't really feel the need to use them. I think I'm going to talk about that later. But it feels fun. If I had to break it down, though, I do think it does get a bit tiresome using the same combo over and over again. Usually, like I was telling people with Final Fantasy 16, that the game is as good as you can become creative with your combos, which is true. In this game, I would be a hypocrite because I basically used one stance the entire game. And I just never felt the need to use the other ones because they just didn't really appeal to me, and I didn't really see how it would even be that different. And I have to address this because it's how I feel about it. Like, I feel like a hypocrite myself because when I played Sekiro, there's only one weapon in that game, and I never complained. I thought it was fine. But in this game, I felt wanting more after a while, and I can't really understand the difference why I feel that way between them, and I don't really have an answer still. But it wasn't that big of a deal for it to matter in the long run. Like, it was fine. I still enjoyed myself. I didn't have any real negatives to think about it, but I kind of still do. Or I kind of wish the other stances appealed to me more. I don't know why they just didn't, unfortunately. And I can't really put a finger on it. There's build making in this, which is also really nice. I like build making. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. Sadly, the route that I went and the spell that I used it nullified almost all of it after I got it. But I do like the fact that you can make builds, and I think that's very fun. They give you a lot of stuff to make different ways to play the game, and that's always very nice. I think that's great, and it's here too. I could see that being me coming back to the game and experimenting with stuff, so that's great. The music's great. The ending credits song was fantastic. The music throughout the game is fantastic. The score they played during the boss fights is great. I think I would have a hard time picking some of them out in like a blind test, but going through it as I was playing it, they were very nice. There was a lot of variety in the bosses for the most part. It was very surprising. There was some unconventional bosses too that I haven't seen other games try to do. That was very nice, I would say, because after a while you tend to kind of see the same ideas regurgitated with like maybe a 5% change. But I felt like there were some bosses in this game that I never really saw people try to do, and I appreciated it. So their boss variety I thought was good. There are some repeats, but I don't think it's enough for it to matter. I'm trying to think. The graphics, I'm not a graphics person. I don't really care, but I cannot deny and say that the graphics are not impressive, and they look great. They do. And I think for the most, it's just a pretty solid game, I would say. I think that's all I would wrap up in the good. Overall, it was pretty nice. I don't really have many bad things to say about it, but I do have some. My number one con, again, this is nitpicky, but on PC, I don't know if it's related to my hardware or I don't know if it's the game itself. You never know on PC because it's a toss-up. But for some reason, it takes 15 seconds for the settings tab to load, and I find it to be one of the most annoying things ever. Like, if you just want to test out some settings, you got to wait 15 seconds for the sucker to load every single time. And it eventually just made it to where I just stopped caring to open up the settings. I find that really annoying. Like, that as just like a core mechanic in any game that has nothing to do with the gameplay itself. I don't know why it's that way. I want to know why. I don't know. I don't have this issue in any other game. The other thing that I didn't like about this game was the enemy descriptions, and I think I complained about this a lot as a broken record. And I'm going to tie that into the story too. I'm not saying I dislike the story, but I'm going to tie it into the enemy descriptions. So the way they describe enemies in their encyclopedia in this game, I'm just going to call it encyclopedia, I don't like it because I feel like the information that I want to know, the game won't tell me. And the game seems like it's mainly giving you recaps of this person's position in the journey of the West, which is prior to this game or, before this game. And it's not telling me like why. And the stuff I want to know is like, why does the enemy look the way it does? Why do the way they behave the way they do? And stuff like that. And why are they doing the things the way they are? And I felt like the more I read the descriptions, the more I felt like I was not getting a grasp on this particular character's position in the story. So eventually, I just stopped reading them all together. Which, if for me, if you ever watch my stream and me play the game, I will sit here and read everything a game has to offer, even if it takes hours. And I didn't do it in this game because I felt like the stuff that they were giving to me was not what I wanted to know. So I was a bit bummed out by that. Again, I'm not going to say it's bad. It's not. What they're doing is good. It's just not how I would want it. And then I'm going to seg that way into the story is that by not having that information and my fault, I should have did a recap of the journey to the West. I was kind of confused by, I would say, 75% of the story beats of what was going on. I could be that, I was streaming and my attention was split. It could be that I just didn't understand things. Happens all the time. And it could be the descriptions. Maybe they had stuff in it that would make the understanding of the characters better, but it just wasn't to my liking. But for a lot of the stuff, like the why is this going on? Okay, who is this person and what's going on? I was very confused by a lot of the stuff. I get the gist of the story, and it's fine, and I understand, but like the small person to person connections, some of it was lost on me, and I think it's my fault for the most part, but I also think the game doesn't help in a way. Like I feel like once I finished Sekiro, right? I was relating it to Sekiro. I feel like I had an understanding of what's going on. Like in typical Souls fashion, you can read the item descriptions, you can read you can pay attention to the environments, you can pay attention to what people are saying, and you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I love that shit, right? In this, I had a harder time getting understanding the story, but I'm gonna say that's probably a me issue. Lastly, last thing I have to complain about is the stuttering, and I cannot sit here and not address it. I understand it's 2025 now, but I started playing it in 2024, and I was playing on a mechanical hard drive. I understand they're old as heck. I never had problems with them. I understand it's going to get aged out eventually. And I was like, okay, I guess the game is struggling to load in the assets it needs to load. So I'll go get an SSD. I got an SSD still here. Although admit it to a lesser degree, but when boss fights would happen, it would happen more during the boss fights because I guess of the effects that popped up and everything. And oddly enough, the longer I would fight a boss, so on some bosses that took me a while to beat, they started stuttering more rapidly as the fight went on, as like a memory leak issue was happening or something, which was very weird. And then I noticed towards the end of the game, pretty much every boss stuttered. When I installed the SSD and I restarted, no stuttering was happening. But then as the game progressively went on, I just saw like, okay, now every boss is stuttering at this point. It happens. I know it's an engine issue because we played Silent Hill 2 remake recently, and it was prevalent in that game as well. And everybody's complaining about it. It sucks. It really sucks, especially I think in Silent Hill 2 you can kind of get away with it because it's a slower pace horror game. The action's not fast. It's annoying, but in this game, it can really suck in boss fights when you need to dodge a specific move and the move stutters, and then it messes up your timing and you get hit and you die, or you get hit and that wouldn't have been a hit. It doesn't feel great, and it really sucks that this is an issue that people have to deal with, unfortunately. And honestly, it just shouldn't even be this way. I hope they can fix this stuff in the future. I got over it. I didn't let it hamper my enjoyment of the game because there's not much I can do about it. So, you know what I mean? Can't really complain about what you can't fix. But it really does feel like this shouldn't be this way. And I know I'm going to say this again in a future title, which sucks. So, as for the wish list stuff, the only thing that I could even remotely put in here had already been added into the game. They added a map into the game. When I first played the game for like 20-something hours, I found myself saying, I wish they had a map. They updated the game literally like 2 weeks before I came back to replay it, added a map. I thought it was great. The map is really nice. I think it makes the game better. Although, if it's not there, does it make certain aspects harder? Sure. But I was playing the game perfectly fine without it. I was just moaning, wishing it was there. It's a nice addition, I will say, and I'm glad they added it. And that's honestly the only thing that I can even remotely even put in the wish list, and it was added into the game, which is nice. So that's about it. I would say, all in all, I think the game's pretty fantastic. I do think the hype that the game gets, I do believe that it earns. It has some great moments. It is definitely challenging to play, despite what that dude said at the Game Awards with it being an easy game. I think it definitely will challenge people for sure. It's a fun game, though. I do recommend it. I think it's worth people's time and money. So that's it. Thanks for watching.